Casper Jacob Shane O'Brien was born in Flint Township, Michigan on September 25, 2018, to parents Damien and Jessica O'Brien. He had a little sister and a little brother named Phoenix that passed away before the events of today's story. He was described as a bright, loving young boy whose joyful spirit touched everyone around him. He loved Super Monsters, which is an animated Netflix show about kids who transform into classic monsters. Casper's favorite was Frankie Mash, the kid who turns into Frankenstein's monster. Now, there is unfortunately not much known about Casper because his life virtually had no documented trace outside of his home. He was autistic and didn't speak and had never been enrolled in school. Damien, his father, was 40 years old. He worked as a cloud engineer for Delta Dental, a fairly well-known dental insurance company. According to news sources, his family's health coverage was as good as it gets. Jessica was 41, and it's unclear what she was up to because, as you'll soon hear, it seems possible that she wasn't doing anything productive inside the home. Also living with the O'Briens was a man identified only as Casper's uncle. The family rented a 3-bedroom house on Danya Street in Flint Township. Their landlord had grown concerned as the property was visibly falling into disrepair and the couple wouldn't let him inside. Instead, they simply left the rent on the front porch.
In emerging cases such as these, it is very important to try to stick to the facts as we know them, and if you are choosing to give potential theories, to be responsible in how those are presented. To be upfront before we get into this, Damien and Jessica have yet to go to trial and are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. You always want to be careful to avoid reporting in a way that risks affecting a trial, so with that out of the way, let's cover what we know so far. In February of 2024, Jessica brought Casper to an urgent care clinic, which was the only documented medical visit of his life. He was diagnosed with an acute cough, throat congestion, and metabolic disease. He weighed a little over 104 pounds at that visit. The doctor referred him to a pediatric endocrinologist, but he never went, and no follow-up appointment was made. Jessica would later state that she had a traumatic history of being essayed by a doctor, and that this was why she avoided taking herself or her children to medical appointments, as she didn't want to subject them to the same experience. On the morning of November 4th, 2025, Damien and Jessica made a phone call to their veterinarian. Allegedly, one of their dogs had suffered a stroke the night before, and it needed to be seen. Sometime after that, Jessica called 911. She told the dispatcher her son was unresponsive and not breathing. Casper's uncle, who found Casper with blue lips and foam in his mouth, cleared his airway and started chest compressions. He was still performing CPR when paramedics arrived. Flint Township Emergency Services responded to the house on Danya Street. The paramedics went in first. According to prosecutor David Layton, the police couldn't even follow them inside as there wasn't enough room to move around. As I'm sure you could imagine, the home was a scene straight out of Hoarders. Per the probable cause affidavit, the floor was not visible beneath the trash that littered every surface. There was no working toilet, and feces had accumulated throughout the house, which was also infested with bugs. According to the police report, the uncle told investigators he had repeatedly warned Damien and Jessica that CPS would get involved if they did not clean their house. When asked why he never called CPS himself, he said Damien was the only family he had left, and he was living in their house after all. Casper was found in a makeshift bed shared by family members. He was wearing a soiled diaper. Officers described him as extremely obese and visibly dirty. He was unable to move. It should be noted that Casper was 4 foot 2 inches tall and weighed 255 pounds. His body mass index was 71.7. According to CDC growth charts, the typical BMI for a boy his age is around 16. Well, Casper's was almost 4.5 times that. The paramedics couldn't treat him where he was as there wasn't enough space to do so. They moved him to the ambulance where he was taken to Hurley Medical Center. There, at just 7 years old, Casper O'Brien was pronounced dead at 9:32 a.m. Genesee County Deputy Medical Examiner John A. Baczynski determined that Casper died of dilated cardiomyopathy, which is a disease affecting the heart. What happens is the ventricles, typically starting with the left ventricle, become thin and stretched out, leaving the heart unable to pump blood the way a healthy heart would. Some of you know that I'm a medical coder, so when I saw that Casper had this disease, I raised an eyebrow. I have to tell you, I have never once coded dilated cardiomyopathy in a child. I don't believe I have ever coded any form of cardiomyopathy in a child. When I looked into pediatric dilated cardiomyopathy, I wasn't surprised to see that roughly 60 to 70% of cases are idiopathic, meaning the cause is unknown. The disease is poorly understood in children, but some identifiable causes have been genetic mutations, muscular dystrophy, and viral infections that cause inflammation of the heart. The literature states that the majority of children with this disease are diagnosed before the age of 1, assumedly because the symptoms make it pretty obvious something is wrong. In a baby, this would be refusing to eat, rapid breathing, excessive sweating, or failing to gain weight. Bring all of this up to you to point out that although what we know so far might suggest that these parents were negligent, it seems like the negligence may have started later in Casper's life. If Casper was diagnosed at birth, there's a chance that he would have died before he was 7 years old. The 1-year survival rate from diagnosis as a child is 87%, but the 5-year survival rate is 77%, so almost a 1 in 4 chance of death. It should also be noted that 26% of all children will either require a heart transplant or die within the first year of diagnosis. Bring all this up to say that it's unlikely that Casper had symptoms from birth. There was nothing I could find regarding his medical history or if he was on any medication. The medical examiner listed morbid obesity as a contributing cause in Casper's death. The attending physician at Hurley, who was a specialist in CA and neglect, documented that both were also contributing factors. When we look at causes contributing to dilated cardiomyopathy, some sources say obesity is one, but other sources give the nuance that it's not a direct cause, but a factor that exacerbates existing cardiomyopathy, meaning that something else had to have caused it first. Now, I'm not a doctor and I am not diagnosing anybody, but these are very interesting pieces of the puzzle when figuring out exactly what happened here medically. I would really love to hear the viewpoint of a cardiologist, especially a pediatric cardiologist on the matter, and if you happen to be one, I would appreciate your opinion in the comments down below. Now, when police and medical personnel examined Casper's body, they found what investigators described as some of the worst open sores and rashes they had ever witnessed. They were infected and swollen, covering his back, legs, and thighs. His hair had gone so long without washing or brushing that it had begun to mat, and it had a strong foul odor to it. His fingernails hadn't been cut in some time. February of 2024, Casper had weighed a little over 104 pounds, as we mentioned earlier, but by November 4th, 2025, he weighed 255 pounds. He had gained roughly 150 pounds in less than 2 years.
Genesee County Chief Assistant Prosecuting Attorney John Potbury described Casper's daily diet, which included a large bag of potato chips, a large order of French fries, apple juice, and sparkling ice carbonated water. There was no indication that Casper was given any opportunity to exercise. Jessica told investigators he spent approximately 12 hours a day lying in bed, and that she believed Casper had avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, a condition in which sufferers restrict what they eat based on sensory properties like texture, smell, or appearance. According to Jessica, Casper didn't like getting wet, which she claimed made bathing him difficult. She said she used baby wipes on him 2 to 3 times a week and estimated that his last actual bath had been about 6 months before his death. After investigators walked Jessica through the extent of Casper's injuries, her response was the following, and I quote, "This was completely unexpected." During the course of the investigation, both Damien and Jessica told police that they both had mental health issues. Damien told investigators that he had a drinking problem but had been sober for 3 months due to his diabetes. Jessica told investigators separately that his drinking had gotten really, really bad and that they weren't communicating.
While all of this was unfolding inside, Casper's 5-year-old sister was found outside. She was unclothed, dirty, and had knots in her hair. She was also morbidly obese, weighing 130 pounds. Prosecutor Layton described her as being like a feral child. She was immediately taken into the care of CPS. Jessica later told investigators she suspected that she was nearly blind in one eye, but she had never taken her for an examination. As we mentioned previously, Casper had never been enrolled in school, and neither had his little sister. In addition, CPS had no prior record of either child. Prosecutor Layton said that none of these kids even existed in the eyes of the government. CPS had never been out there. Nobody knew about these kids. They had not been to school. He also highlighted the call that they made to the vet, saying they had called the veterinarian about one of their pets. They knew what to do for the dog, but they didn't do it for their own child. In another statement, Prosecutor Layton said, "This was a sad and horrific case involving the wanton and willful neglect by two parents for the care, welfare, and medical needs of their son. Their neglect led to their child suffering severe bed sores, various rashes, and other physical health disorders, including extreme morbid obesity that ultimately led to his early death." Damien and Jessica O'Brien were charged on June 23, 2026, and arrested the following day. The two of them are being held without bond at the Genesee County Jail. They're each facing 5 counts. 1 count of second-degree murder, 1 count of torture, and 3 counts of second-degree CA, one of which covers the neglect of Casper's little sister. Damien is being represented by attorney Elias Fanous, while Jessica by attorney Tracy Giesbert. A probable cause hearing was held on July 2, 2026, before Chief Judge Mark McCabe. Neither parent appeared in court. The defense asked for more time to review discovery, as attorney Fanous noted that the case involves more than 400 pages of medical records. He told the court, "We're still reviewing discovery here, Judge, but I don't see murder, let alone torture." The hearing itself was postponed, and Judge McCabe also ordered that the two parents undergo competency and criminal responsibility evaluations before the case proceeds. Both defense attorneys filed motions for reasonable bond, arguing that neither parent poses a danger to the community, but Judge McCabe denied both of them. On the denied bond motion, attorney Fanous said, "This is a tragic case. It shouldn't be made more tragic by him having to grieve the loss of his son while in jail." The next court date is September 9th of this year, and no trial date has been set so far. Second-degree murder and torture each carry a maximum sentence of life in prison under Michigan state law. Legal analyst and former state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg, published a piece on his Substack, which I will have a link to in the show notes, and it's always very helpful to have the viewpoint of attorneys in cases such as these. He argued that charging the parents with second-degree murder rather than manslaughter was the right call. He described the case as a slow, agonizing, years-long process of willful and wanton cruelty, and argues that with Damien employed, with great health insurance, poverty was not an excuse here. He also highlighted how unique it was in this case to charge second-degree murder because usually when you have a case of medical neglect of a child, the charge is usually involuntary manslaughter because it doesn't require proof of intent to kill. It only requires proof of negligence. But with second-degree murder, while it doesn't require proof of premeditation, it requires proving willful and wanton misconduct. Essentially, that the defendants acted or failed to act in such a way that creates a situation where the most likely and obvious consequence would be great bodily harm or death. Because this wasn't a case of a single mishandled medical emergency, but instead a series of choices made over the course of years, prosecution is basically arguing that the parents understood, or should have understood, what the final result was likely to be.
As this case is just weeks old at the time of recording on July 3rd of 2026, we're going to be keeping an eye out for updates as they become available. For reference, the probable cause conference literally just happened yesterday. As neither Jessica nor Damien have yet to go to trial, they're considered innocent until proven guilty. On a positive note, Prosecutor Layton confirmed that Casper's little sister is in temporary foster care and is doing quite well despite everything that she's went through and witnessed. Casper's funeral was held on Saturday, November 15th, 2025 at Sharp Funeral Homes in Swartz Creek, Michigan. Friends and family were received from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. His obituary asked that in lieu of flowers, contributions be made to the family in the care of Damien O'Brien. It's worth noting that Casper's obituary was written in November of 2025, months before any charges were filed. But what's also worth noting is that the only known recent photograph of Casper O'Brien was the one that was provided to the media after his death, one that was clearly edited a lot. Although we can't confirm this, some folks have suggested that it's an AI generated rendering, and I can see how someone might think that. However, it is important to note that touching up a picture, especially if you're using an app to automatically do it, can make the picture look AI generated when it actually isn't. Furthermore, looking at Jessica's social media, she hasn't posted a picture of Casper since he was 4 or 5 years old. This means it's possible that no pictures of Casper were taken for 3 years of his life. If that is true, then that, my friends, should show you just how much this family really cared about him.